Tonight we're going to, this is the third lesson for the Kosher Kitchen. It is November the 4th. Thank you. I think by now it's the 20th of Cheshvan. We're going to pick up where we left off 2 weeks ago, which for those of you that recall, was actually on page 13, which is actually a review of the entire lesson 2. So I'm just going to fly through that. I know a couple of you weren't here a couple weeks ago, but that's where we're going to pick up from. So again, we're on page 13. A quick review of this lesson, and I really want to push through to lesson 3 as well. Hello everybody, how you doing? Okay, so one of the most important, when you want to talk about Hilchos Kashrus, let's say one more thing before we start. Very, very important. Our sponsor for this evening. Tonight's shir is actually, it should be a schus for Aiden Ben Rotem, who needs a refuah shlema. She's a 2-year-old baby. She should have a speedy recovery very soon. One of the most important premises when we talk about Hilchos Kashrus is how the item is affected is the way it's rectified. So depending on the source of heat and the amount of heat and the quality of heat, where let's say the meat enters the container or the dish or the pot, wherever the case may be, the way it goes in is the way it's going to come out. So if you turn again to page 13 of the pamphlet, when you want to talk about pots and pans, how are pots and pans affected? So again, if something is roasted, what is the definition of roasting? Definition of roasting is heating something without a liquid, right? Without a liquid, or just a little bit of oil would also be still considered roasting. So if you have a kli, let's say, you have a tray, you have a dish, and it had really absorbed pig, and it was on the actual fire itself. It was placed on a burner. It was placed on inside an oven. The only way you can remove it, the only way you can kosher it, would be through direct fire. Since the content of the pig entered the pot using direct fire, in order to remove that taste, it requires direct fire on it, and that is called libun. Okay? And we saw there are 2 different categories of libun. There's libun chamor, which essentially is torching. That would actually give off a spark, as opposed to libun kal, where just a straw would touch it, it would disintegrate. Okay, we saw that a couple of weeks ago as well. And through cooking, which is the most common way we use pots for, if again we used non-kosher food was placed in a pot, was placed on a burner, and this pot became not kosher through water, through cooking, then we use the classic way of koshering things, which is called hagala, in order to remove the taste that our pot absorbed. And that's again on page 14. I don't want to read this inside because I don't want to get a bit too it's boring. But if you take a look there in the middle, a utensil which absorbs through indirect heat from fire will be kosher through the same process of heating through indirect fire. And the exact way to do hagala, I believe if I'm not mistaken, is actually going to be spelled out here in a minute. Okay? Let's move on. There are 2 different ways to do hagala, and just to reiterate, the minhag Ashkenaz is to wait 24 hours. So let's say your pot, again, doesn't make a difference if it's treif or it's milchiks or fleishiks. If we decided that a pot is actually treif, you got to wait 24 hours. The reason why 24 hours, and remember, what do we say, what happens to food after 24 hours? What happens to the taste? Becomes? Not batel, becomes spoiled, right? It's pagam. It's like this disgusting, we are aristocratic. We want fresh taste of bacon or pork, right? Something which has been sitting around for 24 hours is considered disgusting, it's considered ichi, and therefore it's pagam, in which case that can be kosher. But something which is good tasting, it has a flavor of a beautiful taste, that we don't want to kosher, because if we bring out that taste, it could actually cause a little problems. It's better to wait 24 hours and then try to remove the disgusting taste that the pot absorbed. So that's the halacha, tam pagam. And that is actually what we need to do in order to kosher the pot. And if you just turn the page again, because I believe this is all review, the actual process we'll see in a second. And then the other case for dishes on page 15 in the middle, and that is iroi, certain dishes which actually really never came in contact with direct fire, you can kosher them through iroi, and that is actually pouring from a boiling hot pot onto a dish. And when would you actually use this? If you take a look again on page 15 in the middle, koshering ba'iroi is the process of pouring boiling hot water from a first degree hot vessel in which it was boiled over a vessel which requires koshering. So this type of hagala is less effective and is only valid where the utensil in question absorbs something forbidden through pouring something hot. So for example, if I have a plate, and I have a plate which, again, is kosherable, so it will not be earthenware, but I have, let's say, a metal plate, and on this metal plate, or metal utensil, I had something not kosher, whether it was milchiks, whether it was, or the opposite, whether it was fleishiks, and poured on our kli, or it wasn't used for kosher. So when I kosher it, I would use iroi. Iroi would also be used, is actually even more common, as we'll see hopefully by the end of today, for various things in the household, like countertops and the like. So again, iroi is you're taking something which is boiling hot, so you plugged in something to a boiling kettle, or that you had something boiling on an element, and you used that water while it was still boiling hot, you poured it over the item that became treif through iroi, through some type of splash, something very hot that fell into an item. Yeah.
And how does that work? Because if you're pouring it on the whole dish isn't actually immersed at the same time, it doesn't make sense. Like,
so if you have, let's say, if you have let's say generally speaking, if you have, let's say, a plate, so let's say you have just to make it a little bit easier, if you have, let's say, a metal plate that you would need to kosher, so, and it only became, let's say, treif through splashing, so it's true, you'd have to somehow, you can do that, you can be able to absorb you'll be able to pour the hot water over your plate. I mean, it's a little tricky, but you could do it. It could also, you'd have to do it all at the exact same time, you could, one area, half, and then the other half. Okay, if you just continue there on the bottom of page 15, silverware. Rarely is a dish ever used to cook on. Silverware is more complicated because sometimes a spoon or fork is used to stir a pot on the fire. Famous question, halacha, on the poskim, whether we follow the usual usage or not. I believe we even talked about this also in the past. The usual usage of a utensil is considered rov tashmisho, and the general halachic accepted practice is to follow the minhag Ashkenaz, which actually he's concerned, he's choshesh for what's called occasional use. Sometimes we'll take, let's say, a spoon or a spatula, although generally speaking, we'll take spoons and we'll eat with them. We all know sometimes we take that exact same spoon and we will stir our pasta, whether it be milchik or whether it be some fleishik meat sauce on the element. So all of a sudden we went from something which is used as a table, which really is never used with anything that hot, or as best would be a klisheni. Sometimes we use that exact same spoon, not from a secondary source of fire, but sometimes we actually put it on the fire itself. And because of that, it would actually require proper hagala in order to kosher spoons. So that's why practically we don't really use iroi on too many serving utensils, because sometimes we do put these serving utensils on top of the fire, and so for practical sake, all types of spoons, forks, spatulas that we need to kosher are going to have to be done through hagala, and will not be able to do it through irois. And practically, really, that's a common practice. So, okay, let's talk about cups. Cups and other utensils, which again, they're used exclusively for cold. I believe we also did this as well 2 weeks ago. Do not absorb taste unless the liquid sits for 24 hours. You'll recall that we mentioned one of our challenges, but even in a cold situation, although we said you need something hot, a medium for heat, in order to make something not kosher, we did mention there's a halacha, which is that pickling, which is something sits for 24 hours, is actually a type of cooking. So, kavush kamuvushal, the Gemara says. What's an example that practically might happen? You open up your fridge and you notice that your milk spilt, and it spilled into a Pyrex dish which had chicken in it. And now the milk, which is cold, is sitting in your cold fridge, is immersed. Your chicken is immersed in your milk and it's been sitting there for 24 hours. That could be a potential problem. because it's actually considered cooked, and you'd have to throw out your chicken. Usually, where it doesn't happen too often, you have to have like a crack in your milk container. You have to have some type of spill of some sort. But it could potentially have, if you have little kids at home, they don't close things properly, and they close the fridge, and things get knocked around. It could happen. So I'm speaking from experience. Yes.
Would this work also with Latila? Like, what if you only had one set of cups?
So the truth is, the real minhag. It's a great question. The real minhag is to have two sets of dishes for everything. Some people like there's something about having glass that people use for mochliks and fleishiks. From a minhag perspective, once the minhag, and we live in a society which is affluent, have mochik cups, have fleishik cups. You're going to tell me you're always using it for cold, you're never using it for hot. There could be a time where, which is true, because you're not going to use glass. You're not going to use glass for something hot, right? It's going to be very painful, right, to pick up. The problem is maybe you're going to put it into a dishwasher, which is going to get hot. Maybe one time you'll get mixed up. So it's better, again, I'm not going to tell you if you make a mistake it won't be kosher, but the general prevailing minhag is really to try to keep certain even glass cups separate. So usually we have tall ones and short ones. I don't remember which one's which. I never use the glass. Yeah.
But what if those cups are plastic cups? Not throwaway plastic cups, but hard plastic that won't go in the dishwasher.
Right. So the hard again, the problem is going to be, I'll give you an example. We have hard plastic cups, but sometimes my kids put hot chocolate in them, right? They'll boil up milk and use them for hot chocolate. So you are cases where you're going to use, your plastic ones for hot milchik. I mean, obviously hot fleishiks in a cup. I don't see how you're going to do that exactly. I don't know. Hot chicken soup in a cup. That's not so. You never know. By the way, sometimes a Corel dish maybe, although Corel could be a problem, right? Those Corel dishes that you use for a cup. You you should really keep separate. For both milchiks and fleishiks. If you live in your parents' home and they don't, I'm not telling you to make them buy necessarily separate dishes, but I've heard from a number of different posts. You usually try to keep two separate dishes once that's pretty much the standard minhag today. So, and again, I believe we also mentioned last time as well. Hey, fine, we can read this, the cup section. Cups are utensils which are used exclusively for cold liquids. Do not absorb taste unless the liquid sits in it for 24 hours without being poured out. Therefore, all that is needed to kosher them is to clean them well. The exception to this rule is a new unglazed earthenware container. Some say that until such a container has been used 3 times, it absorbs liquids immediately. What's interesting, actually, if you want to talk about a cold, so the truth is, I remember... who has this? In Yesodei Yeshurun, which is the Sfarim that Rabbi Felder wrote. He lived in Kitchener. Those people lived in Kitchener, right? When Felder Zal, not the junior Rav Felder, but his father, when he was in Kitchener, he wrote a number of his Sfarim there. I guess you have more time to write Sfarim when you're in Kitchener. And in there he writes, and this is accepted, the practice. So let's say you're traveling, you're going to a hotel, and sometimes in these hotels you see they have these bowls that that just sit there, right? That you can use. They're for a bowl and a spoon for breakfast. So again, to have a milchik meal that's cold, you're just taking a bowl. Again, it's a Corel or earthenware dish. It's a cold spoon. Everything's cold. It actually would be permissible to use. The only problem is the minhag, as I think it'll come a little bit later on, is you're not allowed to do that on a permanent basis. But I don't imagine you're staying in this hotel permanently. So you're spending a night or two in a hotel. To temporarily use such a dish would be permitted to do. So permanently, you're not allowed to do this, but temporarily you'd be allowed to use a non-kosher dish for cold for one-time use. Yeah.
But does that have to be not used in 24 hours, or?
So, generally speaking, when you're in your hotel,
sometimes you go down to the hotel and they have breakfast served. So let's say Kate needs a bowl for cereal and milk.
Right.
But what if sometimes they have hot foods, like they are making eggs or something, so you don't know if that's been used in 24 hours.
So the general principle is a great question. Is stam kelim that the average? It's good to know in your house, by the way. When your spoon gets mixed up, right? Which spoon did I use? Which I didn't use? We say the default setting. Like when you open up a Word document, the default is Times New Roman 12-point font, right? The 2-inch margins, or whatever it is. So what's the default? If you don't know, actually you say that stam kelim have not been used in 24 hours. Now, if this is a restaurant which is extremely busy and their turnover is extreme, meaning every 2 hours the dishwasher's going and everything's happening, that's a different story. But you could ask them, is this do you generally use your dishes? You use all your dishes every 6 hours, and you're constantly doing cycles. You could ask them. I have actually no idea how busy restaurants are. It depends. Kosher restaurants aren't so busy. No, it's not sure. Recently, a few ones that are left, they're actually pretty busy. So, but it's a great question. In theory, you're right. If it was used within the past 6 hours,
but usually it's only for breakfast. But breakfast is like 3 hours down. Right. So it could have been less than 24.
Right. So chances are, again, right. If it's 22 hours, actually, some will say Linus Lila is good enough. If it's overnight, it's almost 24 hours. But again, I would say, generally speaking, you're eating breakfast. If it's your hotel, chances are the last time it was used was 24 hours ago. Check-in time is, I don't know, you check in at 6 o'clock, you don't have to be choshesh that someone ate from it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a bowl of cereal. And by the way, if they ate cold, so it's not really a problem, right? So chances, I don't know, I don't know if the non-Jews go to these hotels and make hot sausages. I don't know if, maybe they do, I don't know. Okay, storage in liquid containers. If a liquid is stored for uninterrupted 24 hours, the container will absorb the taste of that liquid, and that is considered kavush pickling, and it is an alternative form of cooking since it transfers the taste of food without heat. The preferred method for koshering a utensil that absorbs the taste of non-kosher through kavush is just to do regular hagala. So if you have, let's say, a liquid container, and remember, if it's going to be a plastic one, it's not going to survive hagala. Most of the thinner plastics are just going to melt. If you try to do hagala, you dip it into a pot of boiling water, so obviously it's not really going to be kosherable. Although if it's a more solid type of plastic, it maybe could survive hagala, in which case it would be okay. But again, generally speaking, we really try to keep for storage containers, we really try to distinguish, in my house, red tops are fleshik and blue ones are milchik, and that's how I'm able to remember. If anyone usually messes things up, it's usually, the men usually mess things up. That's what I've actually noticed. So what I really wanted to do, and with that very quick synopsis, and I think we touched on most of that 2 weeks ago, I really wanted to go to this step-by-step guide for Hagala. This is extremely practical. Now, there are those who do not want to tackle Hagala at home and wait for various shuls before Pesach, usually have Hagala going on, or the Bayit usually does it 2 or 3 weeks before Pesach. I know the Aguda usually has a whole bunch of pots going, boiling cauldrons in order to dip things in. But the truth is, you can do this at home. You just have to know a couple of tricks of the trade, and here's a very good step-by-step guide to Hagala. So this is worthwhile slowing down for and reading. Okay. To kosher by Hagala, follow the following steps. 1. Clean the kitchen utensil thoroughly. If it has any cracks or openings that may have food stuck inside them, these must be thoroughly cleaned out before kosher with Hagala. So step 1 is clean the item, right? Areas that cannot be cleaned should be torched before boiling. So since you're not really going to do that, essentially, if it has too many nooks and crannies, you're not going to be able to kosher it. Yes.
So if something's in some tray,
right.
Where are you cleaning it? Are you cleaning it in your galley? Are you cleaning it in
it's a great question. So that's why you go to your bathroom sink. You go to your bathroom sink to do that. Again, if it's cold, that really isn't such a problem, in your kitchen sink. But chances are you don't want to do that because you never know what might happen. So go to your bathroom. Your laundry sink. That's what we did right before Pesach. Sometimes we camp out in the basement. That's the sink that we use because upstairs everything's kosher for Pesach. One can also use a caustic cleanser to render any forbidden taste like dirt and then proceed to boil in hot water. So meaning if you spray it with some type of really toxic or type of liquid almost that's toxic, that's also considered, it's so brazen, it's corrosive, that sometimes can get and destroy whatever might be in those cracks. And then as we said, wait for 24 hours, right? We said that, me'es la'es, wait 24 hours. Number 3, bring a large pot full of water to a rigorous boil. So you just blast on your element. The pot needs to be kosher. And this question happens all the time. Well, do I use milk? Do I use flesh? Actually, really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. There are people who are machmir to have a koshering pot, but really, you do not need to. The amount of water must be sufficient to completely immerse the utensil being koshered while still maintaining a rigorous boil. So you really want to make sure that whatever you're going to immerse will be completely immersed in one shot and not part of the way, since you're putting a fork in there, if you have enough water, that's going to cover your entire fork. While the pot is boiling rigorously, drop the kitchen vessel in. The utensil must be completely surrounded with boiling water. The utensil should be left in the water for just a few seconds, but should not be left in the water for too long. However, even if it was left in the water for a period of time, it's actually considered okay. And if a kitchen utensil is too big to fit into the pot of boiling water at once, it can be koshered in 2 or more passes. So let's say you have a very long soup ladle, like a industrial-sized soup ladle. You have a super-sized, whatever the case may be, spatula. For example, a barbecue spatula. I should just read the next sentence. Could be about 18 inches or 45 centimeters long. To kosher it, one would follow the above steps. In lieu of steps 4 and 5, one would dip one end of the vessel into the boiling water, and there are those who rinse the end under cold water before proceeding to kosher the other end, which in fact one should probably do. That's considered appropriate. And next, one would turn the kli around and dip in the other end and rinse it. And one must make sure that the 2 immersions overlap a little. This way, your entire spatula was immersed in water. So you do, say, 55% one side, and you do 55% the other side. Therefore, for sure you've covered the entire spatula. Remove the kli and immediately rinse it completely in cold water. Use kosher tongs or a pair of spoons to remove the kli. Obviously, you can't use your hand, or you can't use gloves because it's going to be very painful. If necessary, the tongs may be koshered in the same fashion prior to its use. Rinse the tongs under the cold water along with the kli being koshered. So again, you need to figure out a way how you're going to take that kli out. Right? You got to figure out how to do that with tongs or some of the spoons in order to lift it out. And you're going to need cold water. And you're going to need a big pot, and you're going to need an element that the pot sits underneath to heat it up. And the kitchen utensil is now kosher. Multiple items may be kosher at the same time, or one after another, as long as the pot continues to boil rigorously, and as long as there is enough space in the pot for all items to be completely surrounded by the boiling water. Okay, so you can put 3 knives in there and 3 forks in there, whatever the case may be. You can do it all at once. When finishing koshering, some people have a minhag. Do a gala on the pot that was used for a gala. Those who say that lechatchila, it is enough to pour out the large pot and rinse it with cold water. That is really all you really need to do. Sometimes if they do it industrially, they won't do that. But for a person at home, just take the pot once it's finished, and you can spill it out and rinse it in cold water. Okay, and that generally is how you would kosher your forks and your whatever the case may be. But here we go. This is also something which is very practical. How about koshering a pot? How am I supposed to take a pot if I need to kosher? So forget my big pot. That's all nice and dandy when you have spoons and forks and spatulas. But I need to kosher an entire pot. How am I going to get a pot inside this pot? So here we go. Place a brick or large stone with the oven turned to its highest temperature. So you've now taken a stone or a brick and you've heated it inside your oven. After the stone gets hot, and this, by the way, some people don't want to do this at home, which is why when it comes to the larger items, sometimes we'll wait until there's an industrial koshering going on in the community. Again, if something happens, you can't sue me. One can also use a piece of metal or a large nut or bolt to get hot quickly, and I've seen that before. People sometimes use bolts and heat up very quickly, a little bit smaller and lighter as opposed to, let's say, a brick. Yeah. So, a stone placed on the stovetop flame heats up quickly as well, right? So you don't have to put it in your oven, you can put it on your element. Follow steps 1 to 3 above. So, meaning fill the pot nearly to the top so that it starts to boil over. And here's what can potentially be very messy. Drop the hot rock, or your bolt, or your stone, whatever the case may be, into the pot. Be careful, because the pot will rigorously boil over and overflow. Once it is safe to do so, use another pot to scoop hot water out of the pot and pour it out until the pot is light enough to lift. Once the pot is light enough to lift, pour it out into the sink and fill and rinse it with cold water. But obviously be careful, because a rock or whatever item you're using is going to be very hot. So because you get spoil over and because things are... I think when people kosher their homes for the first time, I believe they set this up quite nicely. I was actually driving today, and as I was picking my son from carpool, I saw I think it was a Lubavitch van that says kosher home is a happy home. Kosher your house, make your house kosher. Call 647. So I don't know. I can't carefully make such promises that a kosher home is a happy home. Hopefully your home is a happy home no matter what. But regardless, I think it is a little bit more complicated and messy. So larger pots to immerse into kosher, although it is doable, as you can see, it does get a little bit messy and potentially a little bit more dangerous, but there is a way to do it. Okay? There's two other things. Yeah.
So you take it, if you have a pot, like a delicious pot, and now you're koshering the utensils,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not sure now if their milk is glaciers, they're all mixed up. You put them in the pot. You don't have to kosher that pot that you used as the pot. I thought you have to do this second step on that pot, so now you don't know if the pot's milk is glaciers.
So if you had, your koshering pot.
Uh-huh.
So if let's say, and this isn't a great example, but let's say this is your koshering pot, and you've placed it in here. It's still boiling, so then you just pour it out. Because the halacha is that if it's still boiling, so when something is boiling, it's, shall we say, too busy to absorb what's been come out of this fork.
Okay, so you don't
Yeah.
have to do this.
No. Yeah. Otherwise, right. Yeah.
Let's say by accident you were boiling stuff, you forgot about it, someone turned off the element, and now the water stopped boiling. Would that be a problem at that point?
It potentially could be a problem. Now, the good news is that you're generally going to have, in terms of a ratio of 60 to 1, you should be okay. Right? Meaning, it's going to depend on the size of your pot and how much water. If you're going to have 60 to 1, but chances are you should be okay, unless you're having, if you have, let's say, 10 forks in there, then maybe you get yourself into trouble. Yeah. So, that's why he said specifically, make sure it continuously boils. As long as it doesn't boil, then it's not going to absorb anything. Once it's only boiled, you've taken it out, then you can just pour the water out. It'll be okay. Okay, there is a minhag, and this is what page 19 says, is not to kosher milchik vessels for meat or vice versa. And the reason is, if you've had pot X in your home for 7 years, and you use it for milchiks, and all of a sudden, you know what, I really like this pot, I want to use it for fleishiks, it's just confusing. Right? We are creatures of habit. We become habitualized using various kalim. To switch it all of a sudden, especially for the men in the house, that's like super confusing, right? So really, 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 you keep a pot, keep it designated for meat, designated for milk. If it gets mixed up, then you should kosher it back to the way it was. If one is kosher for Pesach, then you can change the designation. The reason is because when it comes to Pesach, there's like almost a reset psychologically in your mind towards your kalim, so that would be okay. But otherwise, you really shouldn't. And you make kosher a kli and make it parv. You had, let's say, a meat knife, and you want to switch it to a fleshing knife. You could do that. Yeah, he says you can do that. I thought that you should only wait. No, you should. I thought you should only do kosher things for parv, also only by Pesach. It doesn't say that here. Okay? If the utensil becomes not kosher after koshering it, one can use the utensil for either meat or milk, regardless of a previous status. Right? So if it's a completely not kosher, used, let's say, for pig, and then you're in this situation where it's not milchik or fleisik the issue, where it 100% became treif from something else, then you could use it for something else. Okay, for whatever milchiks or fleishiks that you'd like. Now, there's a couple of technical things that we need to know when we want to kosher. One is it has to be able to withstand the heat. If you want to kosher something and the heat that you're going to use is just going to destroy your kli, you're not going to be able to kosher. And that's what this section here is going to talk about. Any material that will be able to withstand the heat of the koshering process may be koshered using the appropriate method. But if the kli cannot withstand this process, it's going to break, it's going to shatter, and it cannot really be koshered at all. Now, handles are going to be very interesting, because let's say you have many pots that have plastic handles. Can plastic be koshered? So if the plastic is strong enough to withstand the koshering process, then it probably could be. But what are you going to do if it can't? It could be a problem. So let's take a look. If a vessel, kli, or even, by the way, sometimes you have knives, right? You have knives that have plastic handles. So what are you going to do with that? So if a vessel has a plastic handle that cannot withstand hagala, the handles must be removed. If they can withstand the heat of boiling hot water, it may be koshered even according to those authorities that do not allow hagala on plastic, in a case where the primary use of the metal blade and not the plastic handle. Because at the end of the day, let's face it, everybody, even if you want to say that plastic can't be koshered, this is my blade and this is my handle, it's the blade that I'm really interested in koshering, right? It's the blade that's going to come in contact with the food item. And as long as this plastic can withstand the heat, then you can't kosher this entire item. Sometimes if there's a little bit of food that's stuck in between the plastic and between the metal, then you're going to have to make sure that you've cleaned out, it's not there anymore when you're koshering your knife, let's say. But handles could be a problem. If you can remove the handle, it's definitely best. Yeah?
If you're only using the part of the knife that has the blade on it, the needle can only immerse that part of the
You
knife.
should do the whole thing. Yeah. Some pots can be kosher with their handle still attached, provided there are no cracks or spaces in the pot and the handle. Food could be stuck inside, and that has to be cleaned out before you kosher it. Okay. Page is at 19. All right, page 20. Very good. That's the end of that section. Fantastic. Now, this, I think, is also extremely practical. We're actually going to skip page 20. We're going to skip page 21 and go right to 22, which is actually technically lesson 3 in this package, which I emailed out to everybody. How do we kosher ovens, stovetops, microwave sinks, countertops, and tables? I don't know if we get through all this tonight. We'll definitely be able to put a dent into it. Let's talk about an oven. So we live, again, in a society which has a wonderful benefit called self-cleaning ovens. Self-cleaning ovens are extremely useful in the world of kashrus because essentially they get to clean and they will render anything you have in your oven completely disgusting, completely almost like dirt and dust, in which case you just wipe it out and you're fine. The other type of an oven is your classic oven. I think there's still a few of those around, especially if you get an apartment, right? In the newer apartments, the condos, maybe not, but down south on Fraserwood and Meadowbrook, those are older apartments. Sometimes they haven't upgraded their ovens. They're still using ovens that can go to about 550, and that's it. They don't have, they can't get higher than that. So what do you do about ovens? And we know, right? So think about it. It's used. They don't always use water, medium of water, when they're cooking in there. So you have to really, how are you going to be able to clean something like an oven, which is used for tzli, for roasting? So let's take a look. Page 23. If the oven was used for non-kosher, running it to broil for 2 hours can kosher it. Before doing so, the oven should be sprayed with caustic cleaner and wiped clean. Good news. I believe Lubavitch is machmir on this. In fact, I know for sure they do not rely on this. That is not the general prevailing minhag. The prevailing minhag is even an oven which cannot reach the temperature of self-clean can still be koshered through turning it to the maximum temperature for a couple of hours. And what do you do beforehand? Spray it with like some easy off type of cleaning. If you have a self-cleaning oven, do not use easy off. It will destroy your oven. Okay? That's just a technical point. So, in the case of a self-cleaning oven, koshering can be very easy since it doesn't have to be cleaned beforehand. If it is not a self-cleaning oven, then you'd have to clean out your oven beforehand, scrape down as best as you can, wait obviously 24 hours, and then you blast it for 2 hours or so, and then you'd be fine. But in self-cleaning, you don't really have to do anything. When the oven reaches the highest temperature, it is evenly heated at a very high temperature, and it burns up any food residue that may have been inside the oven. This could take, again, an hour or two. Take a look at open up your oven. You'll see on the bottom, get the soot. Wipe it down with a paper towel, and your oven is nice and kosher. There are those who use a blowtorch inside their oven. I don't even see, I know Chabad is often very machmir to do that. I don't understand you can do that. It is going to destroy your oven. Or you potentially might destroy your oven. If you're worried you're going to destroy your oven, it might, since you're not even going to do a good job, because you're worried you're going to ruin your oven, it also could be a problem. So, I'm not quite sure. I would say not use a blowtorch. It could really destroy your expensive oven. Industrial ovens, though, really the only way to do it is to blowtorch with these big, massive stainless steel ovens. that you could blowtorch it without a problem. It's made to be able to resist such high temperatures and even direct heat on areas. But I don't know how many of you are koshering industrial ovens in your spare time, even those of you that work at Grzinski's Bakery. So, I see here, though, we'll discuss using an oven for milk and meat in a later lesson. I guess this is the abridged version of it. It's not that difficult. You designate your oven for milchik or fleshik, and you can just bake or cook the opposite in your kind of food in the oven, as long as it's covered. And if it's uncovered, we are concerned about steam that might spread. It really comes up a little bit later on, so I don't want to deal with it now. The Gemara talks about what's called tanur gadol and tanur katan, the difference between large ovens and small ovens. And what's the problem with worrying about an oven? That there's zeya, that there's some type of, if I have a cheese souffle, right, and I have the milchik steam, it's going to engulf my oven. Let's say I have milchik steam, then goes inside the wall of the oven. And then if I'm going to cook meat, and now the dairy steam that was inside the wall of the oven is going to come back out. It's going to render my meat, chicken, whatever, roast, milchik. That's not going to be so good. Also, I'll tell you the difference. Every single oven by law has to be vented. Right? Your ovens are vented. That's why, there's one of your elements has a vent. So because your ovens are vented, and it's illegal, you can't make an oven without a vent today, so therefore the steam has a way to escape. And since the steam has a way to escape, it actually doesn't really absorb into the wall of the oven like they used to in the times of Chazal. Times of Chazal, they made an oven, it was totally trapped. But today, there's actually a vent in all ovens. And because ovens are large and they're vented, therefore there's more room to be lenient. As opposed to the ovens of Chazal, they were like put underground. If you talk about different ovens, they were totally would immerse the steam. They know where to go. It would go inside of the wall. And therefore, if you cook later on, 3-4 hours later, perhaps, that steam would then go back into the other gender of food, and it would be problematic. Yeah.
So how long should you be waiting, preferably?
You should wait. It has to cool down. And again, if there is if it spills, sometimes you take food out and it spills, that could be a problem, because actual mamashus, actual tangible cheese is sitting there. There's actual cheese sitting there on your oven. That'd be a problem, because you have cheese in your oven. You're not going to be able to cook meat in there. So you got to make sure it's clean, and you got to make sure that it's cooled down. So practically, it doesn't take an oven to cool down. It takes a couple of hours.
And then you have to blast it?
No, then you can just use it for flesheks afterwards.
For the 24 hours one, you don't have to clean
it. If you 24 hours, if there's actual cheese, you should. If there's actual cheese, you still should. The difference would be after 24 hours, it's pagum. But again, if there's actual cheese sitting there, you really want to get rid of anything there's actual taste, not a spill. If something spills and you heat it up, it turns into nothing. If there's actual cheese sitting there, I don't like it. Yeah, you don't want to have actual food in your oven. And again, if it's covered, then for sure it's not a problem. If it's covered, then there's no zeya, right? There's no steam if something's covered.
How is it supposed to be covered though? Like just one cover?
One cover.
What if you put holes in it or something that's not permissible? Like toothpick holes.
Toothpick holes still allow steam to come through, right? So, yeah. You'll see it'll be also practical. We'll talk about microwaves. We'll do microwaves. We'll get there. Yeah.
If you hold by rough shucker so that you wait and you cool it down and then you
clean it out after.
It all on top, you don't clean it out and like you don't spill or whatever, and you uncover your milk and you uncover your plate.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a problem for people? Like if you have guests over that hold but there's two separate ovens. So
as someone, so here's very important. I can promise you, Rav Moshe never had two ovens, never had two sinks, never had. You live in New York City.
Never had
two ovens. There has to be a way to keep glut kosher, mahadrid, with one sink, with one oven. Again, we live in such an affluent society, so we're so used to having all these opportunities. And look, and they're available. It is very convenient to have two ovens on a Thursday night, right? It's very convenient to have two ovens, one milchim and fleshek, to be able to do a lot of, you can bake with one. It's super convenient. There's no question it's very convenient, right? And now you You see these homes that people are making. You have 2 huge sinks, 3 sinks even, right? Milchik, Fleishik, Parv, in 3 areas of the kitchen. You have 2 dishwashers. I mean, it's what we have today is really a luxury. Yeah.
But it doesn't affect like the actual kosher. Like you don't have to say, I don't.
Are you ready? Rabbi Taub told me it was also okay.
Sorry?
Rabbi Taub also told me you don't have to wait 24 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will preserve
Yeah. It's. I'll tell you. This started. I'm on tape, so I have to be very careful. This started when Art Scroll came out with their Kashrus book. When Art Scroll came out with the Kashrus book, they put in their 20. You have to actually check, I believe, the Hebrew footnote to see the leniency. And there was a Kashrus. OU does the kosher webs. So I was watching one of them. And someone asked this question all the time about ovens. Both Rav Schachter and Rav Belsky, who's the other posek for the OU, are like, it turned out to be a very big chumrah that people were doing today. And again, is there room for it? There's room for it. And I think part of the reason why they did it was because they were that people would be lazy and not clean properly, not look to see if there's any residue left over. But if you are a person who's meticulous about cleaning and your cheese souffle which was open and not covered, didn't leave anything behind, you were careful. So then once your oven cooled down, so then you could use it for fleishes. So usually the nafka mina, if I'm not mistaken, is Thursday night. If you want to make pizza in your oven, and then afterwards you want to have cook for Shabbos, that's usually where it comes into to clash potentially. Thursday nights in your oven. Other than that, you just get pizza. Order out pizza. It's not a problem. Yeah.
If it was covered, you still have to wait for it.
Because if it's covered, it's much less. If it's covered, you had a cheese souffle that was covered. Let's say, when I cook meat in there, so what's the problem? There's no zayah. There's no way of.
You have to wait for it to cool down.
Look, to be very honest, the Gemara talks about a situation where you actually cook milk and fleishik in the same oven. You actually cook milk and fleishik in the same oven, as long as it's all covered. What's the problem? In a Tanur Gadol, the Gemara says you can cook milk and fleishik in the same oven. Again, you might not get a good shidduch. No, I'm just kidding. But really, no. Truth be told, you really can. There's nothing wrong with cooking milk and fleishik in the same oven as long as it's covered. Remember how can you need a medium of a liquid in order for things to transfer. So I have a chicken over here, and I have cheese souffle. I don't even eat cheese souffle. I don't know why I'm using it as an example all the time, right? But there's no way how they're going to touch each other. They're completely covered. Again, we're more worried about the spilling. If they're spilling that, again, you're getting into, especially if it's dry, right? By the way, if both things are dry, maybe you don't even need to cover them. All right, but you should cover them.
So if you're not waiting the 24 hours, then do you have to use seed to make sure that nothing's spilled, but do you have to blast it after and then wait for it to cool down?
If you blast it after, for sure it's okay if you blast it after. Then it's like you're kushering your oven. Even those people that say you have to wait 24 hours, if you kosher your oven, for sure you have to wait 24 hours. You've koshered your oven, you've rendered everything.
People that actually kosher their oven after they cook meat, will kosher the oven so they can cook make a lasagna.
Right.
And I'm like thinking,
yeah, no, I know we do that.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. So you do that before.
Yeah.
I asked Rav Hanan about pizza because it happened in my house over Pesach. So he says pizza's not enough steam even.
Pizza's not enough steam. The cheese isn't enough steam.
To transfer the taste.
Really?
That's where Rav Hanan has a whole thing on it.
Because cheese isn't a liquid.
It's not liquid, so it's not enough to transfer.
That's what I said. It has to be even a liquid, right? Like, what's cheese souffle? Sometimes there's you get this more like a liquid too that comes along the sides. But yeah, I told you, people are very. Okay, I'll tell you what really is a problem. A toaster oven is a major problem. Toaster oven really, there's something to be machmer about, and not to use it for milchiks and fleishiks. So that I get. I've seen the status, I've seen the condition of my toaster oven, right? So again, it says here small toaster ovens are very difficult to clean. I don't think anybody here cleans a toaster oven for Pesach. Anybody toaster? Almost impossible. How are you going to clean your toaster oven for Pesach? It's practically impossible. Extremely difficult. There's so many small parts to it where things get stuck. I would, if you're going to use your office, I'll tell you where people have this question. And then people's offices, again, you're in this, you work for a large firm, some people work for a nice Jewish firm company, but not everyone has that luxury. So if you double wrapped your food and you brought it into the office, then that would be okay. But otherwise, really, to use just a toaster oven, or if you get a whole toaster oven for someone who didn't keep kosher, I would just get rid of it. It's much easier.
Why is it that you have to double wrap if you're putting it in a toaster oven, but if you're putting it in a regular oven?
So again, toaster, if you're using a non-kosher toaster oven, I would double wrap it. I would even really, in truth, be told, even in a non-kosher large oven, I would still double wrap anything. You should really double wrap everything if you're using it, which is non-kosher X.
But if let's say it's a milchik toaster oven.
A milchik toaster oven, that's kosher milchik toaster oven. To put fleischiks in there, you have to double wrap it. But yeah, you should double wrap it. But I'd be a little nervous doing that. I guess you really could do it. You don't see that too often. People using fleischiks in their toaster oven. But you're right. In theory, if you do a double wrap it. Okay, let's talk about stovetops. This is very practical. I dove more, so actually we gained a few more minutes today. So here's a problem with stovetops. I'll say you have your classic stovetops where you have 4 elements. The area was that enamel, right? The enamel that's in between your elements is going to be problematic because I would imagine you're having splashes of both milchiks and fleischiks going onto that enamel, right? You're making some souffle now. You're making some sauce, thank you, right? Fleischiks, and it's spilling onto enamel. You're cleaning it up, obviously, but it's still going to be boiling hot from the fire, from the kli rishon spilling on there. So obviously no food is cooked on there, but food that will be splashed on there directly. And so even placing a hot dirty spoon on the stovetop makes that area of the top milky or meaty. For example, for chicken soup boils over onto the stovetop, and then even if the stovetop is clean, if a piece of cheese omelet falls in that very spot, the spot is now going to be treif. And that's fairly common. That's fairly common even in a home. I don't think people have. I guess people do. People have 2 complete oven ranges. They do, huh? If people have oven ranges, they do. So if you do, then it's not such a problem. But I don't know how many people have that. Spills will continue to happen as the stove is used in different times for cooking meat and cooking milk. You have to assume that the area, ladies, in between your elements, you got to assume is actually not kosher. And if food, not cold food, but if hot food's going to fall there, you got to assume it's actually treif. And there's no point in koshering it because it's just going to happen the next day or the next day. So if it's stainless steel, on the other hand, and you want to kosher it to designate it with just one kind of food, then you could just kosher it very easily. Just boil hot water and use irui by pouring boiling hot water. That would actually kosher your stovetop. But most people, I don't believe stainless steel tops. Most people just have this enamel in between their elements on top. Oh, there you go. That's the next section. If the stovetop is the usual enamel steel type, it cannot be kosher. Nevertheless, we'll continue to use it while avoiding putting hot spoons or food directly on that middle area. So again, if you want to put, something cold on there just to rest while you're doing something in the kitchen, that's fine. But I wouldn't put anything hot on there and then eat it afterwards. So if you want to have a potato, you want to blow on your potato, I wouldn't rest it now on your enamel over there. I have it lean on the element that's not on. Right, that would be okay. But obviously your elements, always, every time you use it, you're basically koshering it. By turning on your element, you're practically koshering your element every single time. And stove grates, where's what I just mentioned. The original self-cleaning, every time you use your grate, you're essentially koshering it every single time. So anything that spilled on your grate, if you spill something, the moment you use it, the next time we're just going to burn it off. So, and obviously you never really put food on there, and therefore it's simple, easy to kosher. It's almost automatic koshering every day or every other day. Yeah.
If you have a cooktop that's the glass cooktop, so you don't have actual burners. You have
right.
Like the glass, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Solid. Is it different?
So, again, that's going to lead, there is actually a machlokas what to do about glass. If you have those glass elements, which is actually becoming very popular now, I think in the middle there's like a warmer area. I've seen now. I think that's one of the new things they have out there. So does the areas get hot in the? Not in between. Perfect cold. You could touch it or. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's glass. So again, it goes back to can you kosher glass? So if we say you can kosher glass, which is.
It's trick. Like you can't. Because
you're gonna have spills of both. Uh-huh. So the areas in between will be a problem. You're saying. Yeah.
the same thing as like being animal.
Right. Yeah, it wouldn't be any different, would it? Does it get warm? How does that? It doesn't transfer. The heat doesn't move across. They probably build that way purposely. Okay. Microwaves are actually a fascinating topic and things. Here we're going to do. Let's stop here for tonight. We'll start with microwaves, and then we'll talk about things. Microwaves are actually more complicated because there's different types of microwaves, and microwaves are small as opposed to your ovens, which are large, and they're not vented. So you actually could, but the type of cooking that's done in a microwave is actually quite different than the cooking that's done in your stove. So microwaves could both have chumras and kulas, leniencies and stringencies, but we will talk about that, God willing, next week. Okay?